When you think of the 1960s, chances are your mind goes straight to the big cultural shifts, the Beatles on the radio, miniskirts, or the space race. But in the heart of every home, something equally revolutionary was happening. Kitchens, often overlooked in the broader narrative of the decade, became the ultimate reflection of modernity, aspiration, and a rapidly changing way of life. The 1960s kitchen wasn't just about cooking. It was about identity, freedom, technology, and, above all, the future. So let's take a journey back in time and step into those vibrant, sometimes clashing, always fascinating kitchens of the 60s, the shift from utility to lifestyle. Prior to the 1960s, kitchens were largely utilitarian. Their purpose was singular: food preparation. They weren't rooms designed for leisure or socializing. But the 1960s transformed this dynamic entirely. The kitchen evolved into a central hub of the home, where family members gathered, appliances dazzled with futuristic promise, and design spoke volumes about lifestyle and taste. Part of this transformation came from the rise of suburban living. The post-war baby boom meant larger families, bigger houses, and new neighborhoods sprawling across the United States and Europe. With more space came the chance to design kitchens that weren't just hidden workrooms but instead a proud showcase of modern living. For the first time, the kitchen was being advertised as stylish, a place of pride rather than drudgery, color, bold and bright. One of the first things anyone notices about a 1960s kitchen is the color. Gone were the subdued, muted tones of the 1940s and 1950s. The 60s were drenched in vibrant, eye-popping hues: avocado green, harvest gold, burnt orange, turquoise blue. These weren't just colors, they were statements. A bright kitchen announced to visitors that the homeowners were modern, progressive, and, in a sense, keeping up with the times. Cabinetry often reflected this vibrancy, with laminate finishes in bold shades or patterned designs. Countertops came in speckled Formica with aluminum trim. Durable and futuristic. And tiles? Think geometric patterns in unexpected color combinations, sometimes clashing, sometimes harmonizing, always daring. Even appliances joined the color revolution. Refrigerators, stoves, and dishwashers in shades of green or yellow were not unusual. For many, the dream was to own a matching set of colorful appliances, which gave the kitchen a cohesive, magazine-worthy aesthetic. The influence of technology. Perhaps no other decade so fully embraced the future in the kitchen as the 1960s. This was the era of the space race, when visions of a gleaming technological future filled the public imagination. And manufacturers were quick to harness that excitement. Microwaves began creeping into some homes, although they were still expensive and not yet widespread. Electric can openers, blenders, and toasters became staples of middle-class kitchens. Dishwashers, once a luxury, were becoming increasingly common, marketed as a way to free housewives from hours of drudgery. But it wasn't just about the gadgets. It was about what they represented: efficiency, modernity, and progress. The kitchen was no longer a relic of old domestic routines. It was a place where the future was arriving, one push button at a time, open concept living. While today we take open concept living for granted, it was in the 1960s that this design philosophy really began to take off. The old model of a closed-off kitchen, hidden from guests, started to give way to layouts where kitchens flowed into dining or family rooms. This reflected changing social norms. The kitchen wasn't supposed to be a private workplace anymore. It was meant to be a part of family life, a place where mothers could cook while chatting with kids or even while entertaining friends. This shift reinforced the kitchen's new role as the heart of the home. Gender roles and advertising. To fully understand 1960s kitchens, we have to look at the cultural messages surrounding them. Advertisements from the decade are fascinating. On the one hand, they reinforced traditional gender roles, showing smiling housewives in pearls gleefully using the latest dishwasher or preparing Jell-O salads on their new countertops. The message was clear: women belonged in the kitchen, but now it was glamorous, thanks to modern technology. On the other hand, subtle cracks were beginning to show. The women in those ads weren't drudges, they were glamorous, fashionable, sometimes even witty. And as the women's liberation movement gained momentum in the late 1960s, the idea that technology could free women from endless housework became both a selling point and a point of contention. Thus, the 1960s kitchen stood at a crossroads between tradition and modernity, much like the society it reflected, materials and surfaces. When you picture a 1960s kitchen, chances are you see shiny, wipe-clean surfaces everywhere. Formica countertops with chrome trim dominated, chosen for their durability and easy maintenance. Vinyl flooring in bold patterns and checkerboard designs provided both practicality and flair. Plastic became increasingly popular, from dishware to chairs, as a modern, lightweight, and affordable material. Wood cabinetry didn't disappear, but it often came with sleek lines and minimal ornamentation, reflecting the growing influence of mid-century modern design. The rise of convenience foods. The 1960s kitchen wasn't only about design, it was also about what was being cooked inside it. Convenience foods exploded in popularity. Canned soups, boxed cake mixes, frozen dinners, and instant puddings became staples. These weren't just practical, they were symbols of progress. Why spend hours cooking from scratch when technology could give you dinner in 30 minutes? As television, too, played a role. As families gathered around the TV set in the evenings, TV dinners became a cultural phenomenon. Aluminum trays with compartments of turkey, mashed potatoes, and green beans were baked in the oven and eaten while watching the latest sitcom, entertaining in the kitchen. Another fascinating aspect of 1960s kitchens was their growing role in entertaining. Cocktail culture thrived during the decade. Bar carts, built in bars, and stylish glassware often extended into the kitchen and dining areas. Hosts and hostesses showed off their kitchens as part of the evening, rather than hiding them away. Serving exotic foods, pineapple-topped hams, fondue, or gelatin molds, became part of the spectacle. The kitchen was no longer just where the food was made, it was part of the entertainment itself. The space-age aesthetic. The 60s were defined by the space race, and the kitchen reflected that fascination. Futuristic shapes, rounded cabinets, metallic finishes, and sleek appliances made the kitchen feel like something out of a Jetsons cartoon. Even lighting followed the trend. Sputnik chandeliers and other mid-century fixtures gave kitchens a cosmic feel, aligning perfectly with the cultural obsession with rockets, astronauts, and the moon. The global influence. Though we often focus on American kitchens, the 1960s kitchen revolution wasn't confined to the United States. In Europe, Scandinavian design heavily influenced kitchen aesthetics. Clean lines, natural woods, and practical layouts reflected a minimalist approach. Meanwhile, in Britain, vibrant colors and modern appliances slowly began making their way into homes, though often with a slightly more restrained flair than across the Atlantic. Globally, the kitchen was becoming a site of modernity and aspiration. Kitchens as cultural time capsules. Looking back, 1960s kitchens act as cultural time capsules. They capture a decade of contradictions, tradition and progress, domesticity and liberation, utility and style. They remind us how deeply everyday spaces reflect broader societal changes. For some, the 60s kitchen was a dream, colorful, modern, and liberating. For others, it was a stage set, masking the realities of gender inequality and domestic labor. Either way, the kitchen of this era was never neutral. It was a statement, legacy of the 1960s kitchen. Even today, the influence of 1960s kitchens lingers. Retro designs are constantly revived. Avocado green appliances, once derided as outdated, are now prized vintage finds. Formica tables with chrome trim, once standard, are sought after by collectors. More importantly, the concept of the kitchen as the heart of the home, a place not just for cooking but for family, lifestyle, and even entertainment, is a legacy that began in earnest during the 1960s. When you step into a 1960s kitchen, you're stepping into a vision of the future as it once was: optimistic, daring, sometimes garish, but always fascinating. Conclusion: the kitchen has always been more than just a room. It is a mirror of the times, reflecting cultural priorities, technological progress, and social values. In the 1960s, it became a symbol of optimism and change, bursting with color, convenience, and futuristic promise. And perhaps that's why these kitchens continue to captivate us today. They weren't just places where meals were prepared, they were rooms where families lived, where women negotiated their roles, and where the future seemed just around the corner. So next time you see a vintage avocado green fridge or a boldly patterned linoleum floor, remember, you're not just looking at a kitchen feature. You're looking at a story, a dream, and a snapshot of a society in flux.